Hello everyone and welcome to this channel. I am Lilly and in this video I'm going to go over the changes, some of the features, also some of the fixes and otherwise implementations that patch 2.11.0 is containing. With this patch we are getting several new amendments, we are getting changes and also new tweaks to our current game, and of course also the big implementation, the 7th roadmap step, Belief. This step is prayers and burials, and we are getting it with tombs and temples. Quickly starting off with the work spots in our groups. We are working towards achieving a sedentary life if we so choose. So we have been given an additional 7 work spots for our convenience and ease. This makes it a total of 28 work spots per group. And this will surely aid us in maintaining a sedentary lifestyle with a high population. Moving straight on to another addition. This time to the clothing our members are wearing. There are new variations in both cut, shape, color and style to their clothing. You can also see that some adornment has found its way to our tribes and they do look rather stylish. Next on the list is a change in culture calculations. Previously, the culture influence was based on several factors, and this could cause a Meso starting tribes to stay Meso even when really far into the Neolithic era. The calculations are now percentage based, with one person being 1%. This in turn means that the culture you wish to have is definitely your choice, as you can reject migrants that do not have the culture you wish them to have, which then allows you to stay Meso forever if you so wish, while those who want Neo to be dominant can after 4K accept migrants that are Neo and reject the ones that are still Meso. Next up is our wild produce. The yield has been tweaked, more precisely the strawberries and the blackberries. The tweak is allowing us to first of all harvest strawberries from the moment they are growing fruits, as opposed to previously where only 2 days of harvest was possible. So we can now enjoy strawberries for several weeks instead. We also have the density and the distribution of strawberries increased, and this also goes for blackberries. This basically means, oh yeah, more berries. Moving on to community requested changes, and based on feedback we have again been given a tweak to the learning pace of knowledges, and this time it is the speed of which we learn the rudimentary skills that has been increased. So we now have a reduced time for learning rudimentary skills for all knowledges. This will help us in especially early Mesolithic tribes to make sure we can actually teach the next generation our skills before the knowledge holder dies from old age. The problem was very prevalent in small tribes where the player built by need only and hence did not spam. Needless to say though, you as a player will still need to make sure that there actually is work for your apprentice no matter. But they will now within a day or so pick up the rudimentary skill of what they are practicing on, as opposed to several days previously. This will make sure that we never have to spam like mad again to avoid losing any of our knowledges, especially in the very small tribes. It was specifically architecture that sometimes had really big issues. You can of course choose to still spam in order to increase your levels faster than the era would allow it, but you are then no longer playing congruent. Fishing has also had another change, and this time to the logistics. The issue was that fishermen were losing most of their workday walking to and from pools to fish up only one fish when the tribe had stayed for a very long time in the same locality. The system will only target pools with more than one fish in it where it is possible. It will still go by closest pools though, but they will avoid the pools with only one fish in them as long as the next one with more than one fish is not too far off. This will make sure that the loss of work hours to logistics is as minimized as we can get it, which in turn means increased efficiency and a bigger yield coming to camp per workday. Another really big change to the game is the increased aging of animals and humans. So where previously a human aged 5 years per in-game year, they now age twice as fast, meaning in one in-game year they will age 10 years. With that, we also have a tweak in the historical year speed. It is now progressing faster, where the Mesolithic era has the highest speed. Those of you who are Meso lovers, you will notice a significant increase in the historical years passing by, and poof, you will find yourself closing up to the Neolithic era, where the pace will once again slow down a little bit. So for those of you who felt that the Mesolithic era was too slow paced, you have now got more speed. Jumping on to the next change, this time the camera configuration. We can now go really close to our targets, and as such, we no longer have any need for any mods that does the same. We also have been given more trees in our map, so now we do not need to worry about having too little timber close to camp in order to build palisades around our entire village. Moving straight on to some more additions, and great news for us that like to build plenty reed structures. We now have even more reed in the map, and the grass where we can get both reed, fiber and straw has been increased. This is yet another step in the right direction, causing us to manage a more sedentary life without running out of materials that we need for our housing. Yet another community requested change is the speed our tribes have when building. It has been increased significantly, and they will both build and repair faster. Since the speed now is faster, the time to level the skills is therefore reduced, and hence the pace of learning new architecture skills has been increased to make up for it. To aid us in our quest to become more sedentary in the Neolithic timeline, we have a change in the cultivated yields. We now have an increase in the amount of food we can get from our farmlands, where all 4 crop yields have been increased, and the limit of max farms per map is 64. Good luck getting that many. Jumping straight on to some fixes and amendments that has been done regarding the issues we faced when our tribes were around 150 plus population. A lot of time was wasted standing in queues by the pits and baskets to get food. This easily led to starvation and loss of work hours. And after days of this round dance, people became too weak to work, and hence no food would come to camp in sufficient amounts. We basically found ourselves in an evil circle. So, as a help to avoid very long queues at mealtimes, we have got an increased duration of mealtimes. This means that people will start earlier to eat, and also that some will start later. This in turn will even out the queues so that the amount of people in queues are much smaller. In addition, the amount of people that can help themselves to food from baskets are now 3 as opposed to only 1 previously. And the pits are now being opened and closed faster with reduced animation to avoid any slow feeding. There will likely be additional solution to avoid queues for tribes over 500 population, but while we wait, make sure you have plenty baskets that you do increase based on your population. Also, it would help to plant more flax farms to get that extra fiber. And now we are going straight to the 7th roadmap step. This is the most immersing implementation in this patch, namely belief. With belief, we have a plethora of new changes such as more objects, different behaviors, more activities, and also worries and unrest. Having a belief system can offer a sense of comfort, purpose, and connection to others. This is especially true during challenging times. Beliefs may also affect the healing process and improve quality of life. Early humans developed spiritual beliefs to help explain the world around them, and results indicate that the oldest trait of belief present in the most recent common ancestors of present-day hunter-gatherers was animism, or the worship of animals. Belief in an afterlife emerged, followed by shamanism and ancestor worship. Our Paleolithic ancestors arguably had the earliest forms of animism. Beyond just animism, they also seem to have given spirits to natural and inanimate objects. They used rock paintings or petroglyphs or rock carvings for spiritual or magic rituals. So our early ancestors tried to make contact with the spirits of the animals they hunted, and with this also started to worship them to show appreciation for all they provided. They also presented offerings to please and to hope for favors to be granted. With belief, we also have burials and rites. The oldest known burials can be attributed to the Middle Paleolithic period. The deceased, ritually accompanied by stone tools and parts of animals, were laid in holes in the ground, and sometimes the bodies were especially protected by stones and stone structures. The most common way to bury loved ones in the Mesolithic era was often just a hole in the ground or even under their dwellings. We do, however, have evidence of both cremations and also burials of people with, for example, swan wings lovingly placed around them. We also have graves with, for instance, the weapons or tools they used in life, along with other valuables of that time. As people began to settle and farm, they started making proper tombs for their deceased. And since many Neolithic villages had bigger populations than in the Mesolithic, they had to make sure that all had a grave when they passed on to the next life, and hence the graveyard in a more organized fashion was developing. We have 3 types of graves for our tribes in the game. The common one, the more sophisticated stone grave, and finally the Grand Passage tomb. The common grave can be built in any timeline and needs no materials. Your tribe will simply dig a hole in the ground and it will not need any maintenance. The stone grave can only be built with Neolithic influence and will need a smaller amount of stones to be carried to it and placed over the grave as protection from wild animals and the environment in general. While the passage tomb is a grand structure that demands 10,000 stones and 2,500 mud to be completed. You will also need 80% architecture skills, 70% stoneworking skills, and 50% Neolithic influence. This fabulous structure is rather large and can hold many deceased, and it too is reusable. The other 2 graves will only need the rudimentary skills in architecture to be built. You will also need at least 1% Neolithic influence in your tribe in order to build the stone graves. As players, we can place these graves and the tomb as we like and create graveyards wherever we see fit with any size that we deem necessary. When a member dies, your tribe will carry the deceased to their internal resting place, any grave or tomb that has free space, and place them inside. If you do not have enough graves with space left in them, the relatives of the deceased will become very upset and might even leave if you do not hurry up to rectify the situation. The deceased will, after a year or so, which is several hundred historical years, disappear, and the grave will then become free for another deceased to be buried there. So we do not need to worry about having to build hundreds of graves, as they will be reused every in-game year. And now on to the spiritual part of belief. When praying, our individual tribe members' unrest will be appeased with the grade depending on the temple strength. The speed of the appeasement granted is then decided by any support structure. The menhirs we have in the game are now functional, with plenty new objects such as temples and also an altar for offerings to the gods and spirits. We have 2 types of offerings that we as players can place where we see fit that will give appeasement when people are praying. The Mesolithic and the Neolithic offerings grant a 25% reduction to unrest, and they have each their own visual version. And they do not need materials, but they will need to have the offerings replaced on a regular basis. Altars and temple menhirs also has randomly showing offerings that is placed by your tribe when they are praying, and we as players cannot control it. Let's go over the various temples and menhirs and check out their function. The menhir is a support structure to your temples and will grant an increased speed of comfort from any temples. This structure is meant to be placed together with the temple menhirs or the altar, as they will increase the appeasement rate of any nearby temples. It takes 1,000 stones to be built and can only be built when you have 40% architecture skills, and you must also have any percentage of Neolithic influence in the tribe. The trilithon is the big gun for adding increased appeasement speed to any temples. The trilithon takes 3,000 stones to be built and will give any nearby temples a very fast appeasement rate. Both these support structures will also give speed to the appeasement of the Mesolithic and the Neolithic offerings. Both of these support structures must be placed within 20 meters, which is roughly 22 yards, of the temples they are supposed to support, or the effect is lost. In order to build the trilithon, you will need to have any Neolithic influence in the tribe and 70% architecture skills. This is basically our chance to finally build the famous Stonehenge. And now over to temples and their function. The small temple menhir is a structure for praying to gods and spirits. It grants 50% appeasement and it costs 1500 stones to be built. It can be built in any timeline, but you do need 30% architecture skills to build it. If you place support structures around it, such as menhirs and trilithons, the speed of prayer effect will be greatly increased. The altar is also a structure for praying and will also benefit from having support structures around it. It grants a 75% appeasement, it costs 2,500 stones, and you will need 30% architecture skills and also 30% stoneworking skills for it to be built. The big daddy temple for praying is the temple menhir. It takes 4,000 stones and takes 60% architecture skills. It also takes 60% stoneworking skills and 40% Neolithic influence in order to be built. If you place any support structures around these temple menhir, your people will be done praying with 100% appeasement in a swift. The temple menhir will grant 100% appeasement. Small reminder to anyone that now is concocting up plans to up the work hours and use the praying system to get rid of unrest when people feel overworked. It will not take away the effect of increased work hours, but it will take away the complaints. The prayers will only grant psychological appeasement from increased work hours and not physical. On to the next fix, this time the lack of fibre in some ice age areas that was below current sea levels. A fix has been implemented that affects tall grass growth in this specific elevation, so now there will be fibre from tall grass even at -degrees. Keep in mind though that the colder it is, the less plant life and animal life there will be, so you might not drown in fibre during the ice age, but you will at least have them in some amounts. Tending seed of course, as some areas just is not suitable for survival. Next up is the increase in inventory space for stones. Since we will need a lot of stones to build our menhirs, our temples, graves and tombs, we have been given the option to carry more stones to aid in our efforts. So our tribesmen can now carry 3 times higher weight than before, and this of course in turn means that we can get 3 times more stone per trip and hence also a lot faster. So now we will spend a lot less time walking and a lot more time building. That concludes this video about the changes, some of the fixes and features of patch 2.11.0. For an overview of the next step on the roadmap, you can check the link below in the description. I will keep making these videos and of course the tutorial for every patch. And also a playthrough will soon follow as well, where I will test how the new patch is affecting gameplay and the enjoyment of the game. I look forward to seeing you all again, and until then, have fun and take care.
Waqoba